at the beach. There's a person to your left, another to your right. Someone just walked past you in a swimsuit. And your brain, without you asking it to, noticed. You can't help it. You've been doing it your entire life. Every human you've ever met has been doing it. It's so automatic you don't even think of it as a thing. Now here's the question that should bother you. For roughly 830,000 years, ancient humans walked around with no clothes. No swimsuits, no fig leaves, nothing. In groups of 20 to 50 people, every single day, seeing the same naked bodies over and over for their entire lives. And somehow, they were fine. The obvious answer is they were just used to it. That's technically true. But the real answer is way more interesting and a little bit disturbing. Because it turns out the reason ancient humans didn't react to nudity the way you do has almost nothing to do with culture. It has to do with how your brain was built. And clothing didn't just cover bodies. It created the very thing it was supposed to hide. Part 1. The 830,000-year gap nobody talks about. Let's start with the fact that almost nobody knows. Humans lost their body hair roughly 1 million years ago. We know this from genetic research into human skin pigmentation. Clothing, however, only appeared about 170,000 years ago. Now, scientists actually figured out the clothing date from lice, specifically body lice, the kind that live on fabric. They're so perfectly adapted to clothing that evolutionary biologist David Reed concluded they almost certainly didn't exist until clothing did. So his team sequenced lice DNA to find exactly when body lice split off from head lice. 170,000 years ago. That means humanity spent approximately 830,000 years with no body hair and no clothes. Naked. Completely. For almost 1 million years. In that context, asking why ancient humans weren't aroused by nudity is like asking why you're not aroused by elbows. The question assumes nudity was ever supposed to be a trigger in the first place. For most of human existence, it wasn't. But here's where it gets more interesting, because there's a specific mechanism in the brain responsible for this. And it's the same mechanism that explains why you get bored of things you see every day. Part 2. The brain's off switch. There's a well-documented neurological process called habituation. The principle is simple. Your brain stops firing in response to stimuli it sees repeatedly. Not because it gets tired, because it deliberately decides the information is no longer new and therefore no longer worth responding to. This has been studied specifically in the context of sexual arousal. Research published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior confirmed that arousal to erotic stimuli measurably decreases with repeated exposure, and it's a dedicated neurological suppression process, not just fatigue. Now apply that to ancient humans. They saw the same 20 to 50 naked bodies every single day from the moment they were born. The same people. Every morning. Every hunt. Every night around the fire. The brain registered it, processed it, and filed it under. Not new, not relevant. Move on. But here's what makes this really fascinating. The opposite mechanism, the reason arousal spikes, is also well understood. It's called the Coolidge Effect, and it runs on novelty. Research on the brain's reward circuit, specifically the pathway from the ventral tegmental area to the nucleus accumbens, shows that dopamine spikes when a new, unfamiliar stimulus appears. When the same familiar stimulus keeps repeating, the dopamine signal fades. The brain literally stops releasing the chemical that creates desire. Ancient humans had no novelty. Not in this department. Same people, same bodies, same camp, every day. The dopamine had nowhere to spike. Part 3. The mechanism that goes deeper than habit. Now, habituation explains a lot, but there's a second mechanism that goes even deeper. In 1891, a Finnish anthropologist named Westermarck noticed something strange. People raised in close physical proximity during early childhood, even people who were completely unrelated, developed a strong sexual aversion to each other as adults. He called it negative sexual imprinting. Today it's known as the Westermarck Effect. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for this comes from Israeli kibbutzim. Children raised communally from infancy, sharing rooms, meals, everything, almost never formed romantic relationships as adults, even though there was no social rule against it, even though they were completely unrelated. The proximity itself had rewired their attraction circuits. Now think about a prehistoric band of 20 to 50 people. You've known every single one of them since birth. You've slept next to them, eaten with them, shared every moment of your life with them. The Westermarck Effect wouldn't just reduce arousal for your family members, It would quietly neutralize most of the group. Not through willpower, not through social rules, through neurobiology. The brain had literally unlearned how to find familiar people sexually interesting. Part 4, Survival Mode Kills Desire. Here's one that nobody talks about. Stress hormones chemically suppress sexual desire. When cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, is chronically elevated, it competes directly with the hormones responsible for libido. Testosterone drops, estrogen drops, the body stops prioritizing reproduction. Because from a biological standpoint, when your survival is at risk, sex is irrelevant. The sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, actively shuts down the arousal response when it perceives threat. You literally cannot be in survival mode and sexual mode at the same time. The brain won't allow it. Modern people experience this when they're stressed about work. Their libido disappears. Ancient humans were stressed about lions, about starvation, about raids, about their children dying. Their cortisol wasn't elevated during meetings. It was elevated during their entire existence. The chemistry made constant arousal biologically difficult. The body simply wasn't in the right state for it to be a constant background hum, the way it is in modern, comfortable life. Part 5, Naked didn't exist as a concept. This is the part that genuinely breaks your brain if you think about it long enough. Evolutionary anthropologist Daniel Fessler put it plainly, the human body is a supreme sexual advertisement. But he also noted something crucial, that this only became true once clothing existed. The concept of being naked requires the concept of not naked to exist first. If no one has ever worn clothes, you cannot be naked. You're just a person, standing there, existing. The same way you're not barefoot in a world where shoes don't exist. Only by banning nudity did nakedness become a thing. The psychological charge that modern humans feel when they see a naked body, that charge was manufactured. Clothing didn't neutralize it. Clothing created it. Ancient humans weren't suppressing a reaction that we have. They never built that reaction in the first place. It had to be constructed, slowly, over thousands of years of covering up. Part 6, The Myth of the Naked Primitive. Here's something that might change how you think about this entire topic. The idea that ancient and indigenous humans just walked around completely naked all the time. It's largely a colonial myth. Research by Vibeke Maria Viestad, a senior lecturer at the University of Oslo, found that the San people of southern Africa, one of the most studied hunter-gatherer groups in history, were consistently misdescribed as nearly naked by early European observers. Those observers weren't being accurate, they were being blind. The San had sophisticated, culturally significant clothing and adornment systems. Europeans just didn't recognize them as clothing because they looked different from what Europeans were used to. Early anthropological research was, in her words, more racist than scientific, focused on measuring bodies rather than understanding cultures. So the assumption that prehistoric and tribal people were sexually unregulated, roaming around naked with no sense of social order, that says more about the people writing those accounts than the people being observed.
Whoa!
Part 7. Context is everything. Here's a principle from modern psychology that explains a lot of this. Sexual arousal isn't automatic. It's context dependent. Research shows that sexual responses in humans can be conditioned and extinguished based entirely on the context in which a stimulus appears. Your brain doesn't just register what it sees. It registers what it sees and where and why. For ancient humans, the context of seeing other naked bodies was almost always migrating, hunting, gathering firewood, cooking, running, surviving. The brain learns associations. Nudity plus labor equals. This is just what bodies look like when people are working. The same way you don't find your doctor medically examining someone to be an erotic experience, even though the exact same actions in a different context might be. The context was always work, always movement, always doing something. And the brain filed naked bodies under functional, background, irrelevant. The gut punch ending. So here's what actually happened. For 830,000 years, the human brain had no reason to build an association between naked bodies and sexual desire. You saw the same people every day. The Westermarck Effect neutralized your group. Habituation quieted the signal. Survival mode suppressed the rest. And there was no concept of naked to violate, because there was no concept of clothed to violate it against. Then around 170,000 years ago, something changed. Not survival, not necessity. We started covering up for status. And that was the moment, not immediately, but slowly, over thousands of generations, that the human body became a secret. And secrets become charged, and charged things become desired. Clothing didn't cover something that already existed. It created something new. The thing you feel at the beach, that automatic, involuntary flicker, isn't ancient. It isn't primal. It was manufactured. Your ancestors spent 1,000,000 years completely indifferent to the naked human form. It took the invention of fabric to make it interesting. We didn't uncover our instincts when we made clothes. We invented them.